Okay, so jumping right into the supplies, you're obviously going to need your Laura pattern to sew your top or your dress, depending on which one you prefer. You're also going to need some sewing pins. Make sure you have these. You definitely need those every time you sew. And then you're also going to need some coordinating thread to match your fabric. I need some type of pattern weights. These are just large washers that I pick up from my local home improvement store. And then you're also going to need some jersey ballpoint needles. These are very important whenever you're sewing with knit fabric. You don't want any tugging or pulling, so you want to have the right needles. And then you're going to need a rotary cutter or some type of fabric scissors, and of course your fabric. Then we're going to jump right into the pattern pieces. You need a neckband piece, which is pattern piece number 4. You're also going to need your sleeve. And then I also added a long sleeve expansion. If anybody's interested, I'll have that linked in the description bar below. Then you're going to need your back pattern piece and your front pattern piece as well. Pattern is really super easy. The first thing we're going to do is place our back pattern piece on the fold right on top of our fabric, and then we're going to do the same thing to the front pattern piece, making sure that we have the fabric where it says cut on the fold. You want to make sure you have that placed on the fold of your fabric. Then you're just going to cut around with your rotary cutter or scissors all the way around your pattern pieces. You're going to notice a little notch in your armhole. Make sure you snip that notch. This is going to match up to your sleeve piece later on whenever we're sewing. Also make a small little snip along the center front fold of your fabric. Those exact same steps to your back pattern piece as well, and then we're going to move right on to the sleeve and the neckband. I like to just cut off that excess fabric and rearrange it so that I can move on to the sleeve, and just place it right sides together and your pattern piece on top with your pattern weights. And you're going to cut around it just as you've done before, and make sure that you grab your small scissors and snip into those notches as well. The double notches represent your back, and the single notch at the very top is going to match up to your shoulder seam, and the other single notch matches up to your front. Then move on to the neckband and cut it out. Once you have all your fabric pieces cut out, we can move on to the sewing. Is to sew the shoulder seams. So place them right sides together, and you're just going to pin them along the shoulders. Sew it with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then you're going to move on to the neckband, placing it right sides together, and you're going to sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance as well. Then I'm going to want you to press the seam open, just finger press it open, and then you're going to fold it onto itself with wrong sides together. Okay, so now we need to press our shoulder seams towards the back, and the way that you know that it's the back is you should have these double notches along the armhole. That represents the back of your fabric. So then you're going to want to place your neckband that you pressed flat with your iron all the way around. You're going to want to pin that to the very center back. So the seam of the neckband should be placed along the back. Pin the opposite end of your neckband to your neckline, and you're just going to continue pinning all the way around your neckline. This is just going to secure your neckband to the neckline of your fabric, so it's easier whenever you're sewing. Just sew around your neckline with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, making sure you're using a stretch stitch. This is going to go around your body, so you want to make sure that it stretches to fit. Press your seam allowance away from your neckband, then we can move on to attaching the sleeve. So just place your fabric right side up, and you're going to pin your sleeve to the shoulder seam of your fabric with right sides together, making sure you pin the notch to the shoulder seam. Just continue pinning and making sure that you have your notches matched. Then you're going to take it to the sewing machine, and you're going to sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Place your fabric right sides together and pin along the entire side seam. When you finish pinning, we're just going to sew along the entire side seam on both sides, starting from the bottom up. Now all that's left to do is the hem of our sleeve and the hem of our shirt. I like to sew a 1/2 inch basting stitch to mark my hem allowance. All I'm going to do is place my fabric down, and I'm going to sew a basting stitch a 1/2 inch away from the raw edge, and I like to start at the side seam. So round hems can be a little bit trickier than most hems just because you're easing in a little bit of extra fabric. Next, I use my stitching guide, and I just press it into the wrong side of the fabric, and I pin along the entire hem allowance. Then I take my fabric to the machine, and I sew a top stitch 1/2 inch away. Once you finish with your hems, you're all done with your Laura pattern. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I will see you in my next one.